We were in the locker room after a hard-fought game, and before my coach concluded our meeting, he said the same two things as he always does. One, no texting while driving, and the other, a question. Are there any injuries I need to know about? At that moment, I looked up and exchanged pointed glances with my teammates. Of course, we were all hurt to some extent, whether it be through soreness, fatigue, or minor bumps and bruises. I had no doubt that my coach knew that. It's the reality of difficult games and a strenuous season. But yet, I did not meet my coach's eye, and instead became extremely interested with tying my shoes. In all honesty, I didn't want my face to reveal the true answer to his question. I did, in fact, have an injury. I had been suffering with a pulled muscle to my back and a contusion to my pelvis for a couple of weeks now. On the weekends, I rested and hobbled around my house, barely able to walk. During the week, when I practiced with my team, through the glorious advent of KT tape, biofreeze, and ibuprofen, I somehow managed to endure the pain I experienced with each stride, albeit not very well. Over the next couple of weeks, I began to notice that my injury wasn't getting any better and my performance was dwindling. Although I was on the field, my speed and agility were severely reduced. Yet, I continued to suppress my encroaching injury. But why? By nature, athletes like myself tend to be extremely driven and determined individuals. While these tendencies cultivate strong competitors, they also cause an athlete to be more likely to hide an injury. For me and other athletes, sports are a part of our identity as an individual. Not only are the sports themselves important, but also the influential friendships and relationships cultivated due to participation in the sport as well. And for many athletes, these relationships are one of the most important in their lives due to the large time commitment of the sport. In addition, while improving, injuries are a place of judgment in sports, despite being outside of an athlete's control. By creating a culture in which injuries are not viewed as obstacles to overcome, but rather to shove aside, fellow teammates, parents, coaches, and fans motivate, whether intentional or not, the suppression of injuries. With all these pressures mounting, whether it be from myself or other outside forces, I decided to carry on my ruse. Biofreeze in the morning, afternoon, and night. Ibuprofen twice a day. Wraps hidden underneath my clothing. Gritted teeth to suppress the grunts of pain. A study by a Sports Performance Institute in New Zealand found that up to 87% of athletes hide an injury to continue playing. Throughout various levels of development, athletes are suffering in silence and suppressing their injuries in order to continue playing the game they love. The realities of this hush healing is that, in the short term at least, the retributions of playing through an injury are nearly invisible. You get to finish the game, you get to keep your position, you get to help your team, and you get to preserve your ego. In the long run, however, these ramifications become more blatantly obvious. By continuing to play on an injury, athletes are prone to greater injuries, significantly larger amounts of pain, longer recovery periods, and more drastic impacts on their lives. So how do we fix this? First, we need to lose our ego. Sure, when you're at 100%, you may be what's best for the team. But when you're playing at 75% due to an injury, then most likely the person behind you is going to be more beneficial for the team. In addition, it is important to think about the long run. While in the moment the game may seem like the end of the world, the reality is that it's a minor fraction of your life, your career, and the season itself. It is important to advocate for injuries. Lastly, it is important to advocate for treatment. By advocating and voicing initial injuries, athletes will have shorter recovery periods due to the reduction of prolonged play. By informing physicians about their injuries and their situation, Athletes will have greater motivation to tend to their injuries, as treatment plans will factor in their own ideals. For instance, if an athlete were to sprain an ankle, a physician may prescribe playing on it taped for a big game and resting it in the weeks afterward. By considering an athlete's values, greater empathy and trust is built between the patient and the physician. The more trust an athlete has in a doctor, the greater the likelihood of them following their advice and returning to them in the future, as opposed to treating their injury themselves or masking it entirely. During the 1996 Olympic Games, Carrie Strode vaulted in order to secure her team's victory. On her first vault, when she landed, she tore 2 ligaments in her ankle. Pressured by her coach, she was forced to perform an additional vault in order to secure the team's medal. This time, when she landed, she immediately transferred the weight off of her injured leg, and tears began to pour down her face. She had to be carried off the mat. But yet she was praised. She pushed through the pain for the greater glory of the sport. This is not an isolated event. Countless athletes experience the same pressure and praise for suppressing injuries, whether they be young, old, professional, recreational, high school, or collegiate. It is essential that athletes understand the impacts of their injuries and the retributions of prolonged play. It is integral that athletes be in a culture that understands the long-term effects of injuries and not just the glory of the moment. It is crucial that athletes feel that they can put their health first without fear of judgment. Thank you.